Close your eyes and picture the 80s. You probably see neon headbands and hear thick layers of synthesizers, but it wasn't all sad British guys with keyboards. 80s music has a rich lineage ranging from hip-hop to folk. We've just forgotten about a lot of those bands. Between reruns of Star Trek and Cheers, if you were watching TV in the 80s, you might have come across BBC's docuseries The Big Time. The show depicted regular people as they pursued their dreams in various industries, and far and away its biggest success story followed Scottish college student Sheena Easton.
Because I was already off at drama college and I was living in my own little apartment above a fish and chip shop.
Easton's single Modern Girl hit the UK's top 10 and did well on American soft rock radio, but that was just the beginning. Her next release, Morning Train 9 to 5, hit #1 in the US, and she was soon asked to perform the theme song for the 1981 James Bond movie For Your Eyes Only. That went top 10, and so did 1983's Telephone Long Distance Love Affair, and the Kenny Rogers duet We've Got Tonight. As the sound of the 80s evolved into more synth-based pop, Easton evolved with it. She reinvented herself as a sultry dance diva, releasing tunes like Strut and Sugar Walls. Sugar Walls in particular was so provocative that Tipper Gore threw it on the Parents Music Research Council's Filthy 15 list of songs that inspired the explicit lyric warnings we see on music today. Considering it was written by Prince, we're not exactly surprised. Easton's last big hit, The Lover in Me, peaked at #2 in 1988, and then she spent the 90s failing to make the pop chart in the UK or the US. Now, it's been decades since she had a hit. Easton may have hopped on the sultry, sensual 80s pop bus, but it was Sade behind the wheel. Led by the magnetic vocalist of the same name, Sade made a unique combo of soul, jazz, and pop and seduced listeners all over the world. This inventive new sound first proved it could work for the mainstream with the 1984 tracks Your Love Is King and Smooth Operator. From there, they kept peddling hits like The Sweetest Taboo and Never As Good As the First Time, all of which did very well in pop, R&B, and soft rock circles. They dropped the LP Stronger Than Pride in 1988, and it would take another 4 years for them to follow it up with Love Deluxe. This was evidently worth the time it took, as it featured the comeback smash No Ordinary Love. It took the band 8 years to make more music, and a full decade passed before they released another studio recording after that.
I think a lot of people are frightened that if they go away, if they disappear for a while, everything will crumble, they'll come back and there's no place for them.
Sade probably didn't realize at the time how right she was about that. With such long gaps between releases, the public went on to find sonic comfort from other smooth crooners. It's been well over a decade since Sade's last tour, but they were still nominated for induction into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame in 2024. Sadly, they didn't get enough votes to get in, which shows just how far from their former acclaim they've fallen. Synthesizers were icy and robotic at the beginning of the 1980s, but by the end of the decade, pop and rock bands had found the soul in the electronic instrument. The Human League, a project that founder Philip Oakey found a name for in a sci-fi board game, led that evolution. After some early lineup changes and sound experiments, the group found its footing when Oakey brought in 2 teenage backing vocalists, Susan Ann Sully and Joanne Catherall. That made male-female duets possible and helped the legendary breakup single Don't You Want Me reach #1 in the US and the UK.
It's the greatest song ever recorded, and I'm gonna go enjoy it.
They followed that up with Keep Feeling Fascination, which was a bit sunnier and peaked at #8. After a sales dip, the Human League returned in 1986 with an updated sound. They brought in the popular producers Jimmy Jam and Terry Lewis, who helped the group hit #1 again with a more subdued Human. But before long, the Human League went quiet again. Their 1995 single Tell Me When did make it into the top 40, and they're still touring actively, but nothing they've released has charted in decades. Don't You Want Me in particular has made an undeniable impact on popular culture, but if you ask anyone under the age of 50 who wrote it, odds are the Human League won't be the first name that comes to mind. These days, you probably hear the name Boy George a lot more than Culture Club, but there would certainly not be one without the other. Culture Club meshed danceable pop with new wave rock and spent much of the mid-80s pumping out hits like Karma Chameleon, Church of the Poison Mind, Miss Me Blind, It's a Miracle, and The War Song. Led by the androgynous fashion icon Boy George, the English quartet's reign over the music industry only lasted about 3 years, mostly because the band members were absolutely sick of each other by the time they broke up in 1986. Boy George remained an icon of the 1980s and went on to see some success in the 90s as a solo artist. His musical Taboo flopped on Broadway in 2003, and he was eventually arrested and sentenced to prison in 2009 for kidnapping a sex worker. As a result, much of Culture Club's work as a group has been overlooked by the pop culture history books. In fairness, that is some pretty hard lore to compete with.
You went to prison?
I went to prison for 4 months, yeah. Then I was on tag for 4 months as well.
Even so, the band reunited a handful of times after they broke up. Their last studio album came out in 2018, and they're actually still touring as of 2025. If you lived through the 80s in America, there was no escape from Australia's absolute chokehold over pop culture. The likes of Outback Steakhouse ads, Battery spokesman Jacko, and films like Crocodile Dundee and Young Einstein were everywhere on TV. But all of that came after Men at Work scaled the charts. With a combo of frontman Colin Hayes' sensitive but wailing vocals and Greg Ham's work on flute and saxophone, Men at Work made some sensational pop rock that broke all kinds of barriers. The sound worked so well they dropped back-to-back #1 hits with Who Can It Be Now and the iconic Down Under. Their debut album, Business as Usual, was one of the first releases to really take off thanks to MTV. The network didn't have much of a video library in 1982, and Men at Work's music videos got seen by a lot of eyeballs as a result. The band's music skyrocketed in cities whose cable networks carried the new channel. In 1983, they released their album Cargo, with some more melancholy singles like Overkill and It's a Mistake. These would be the band's final hits. By 1986, tension within the group had come to such a head that they split up.
That'll do it. I have other songs.
The band has reunited a couple times since then, but they haven't put out a studio record since 1985. Fans have had to settle for live albums, EPs, and greatest hits compilations. The UK club world produced a lot of duos that made explosive dance pop with an arsenal of synthesizers, and the Pet Shop Boys were definitely at the head of that movement. From 1984 to 1988, Neil Tennant and Chris Lowe dominated dark, brooding dance music with ironic, lyrically detached songs like Opportunities, It's a Sin, and Always on My Mind, while West End Girls hit #1 in both the US and the UK. Post-disco dance music is so quintessentially 80s that the Pet Shop Boys largely faded from the mainstream along with it. They attempted a comeback in the early 90s with the eye-catching LP Very, and while a few of its tracks were well-loved in dance clubs, the record as a whole just didn't sell the way their earlier releases did. Compared to a lot of groups on this list, the Pet Shop Boys have actually continued putting out music at a relatively consistent pace since leaving the limelight. And though it's been years since they've had a hit, they're still touring regularly. Loverboy is another one of those bands that has a song everyone's heard, but very few people remember their name. On stage and in the studio, Loverboy always had energy, and while many 80s bands chose between hard rocking guitars or futuristic synths, Loverboy went for both. That bombastic combo gave headband-clad singer Mike Reno the backdrop he needed to belt his suspenseful hooks and erupt on stage. For most of the decade, the group of Canadian musicians made a lot of aggressive party favorites like Turn Me Loose, When It's Over, Hot Girls in Love, and Loving Every Minute of It. Loverboy got so popular that Reno attempted a solo career, but it largely fell flat. Possibly his biggest achievement from that endeavor was performing the Footloose Love theme duet Almost Paradise with Heart's Ann Wilson. They may still play live, but very few are going out of their way to celebrate Loverboy in any meaningful way since the grunge of the early 90s began overshadowing synth pop.
I wouldn't change anything. We had an awesome career. We were still playing 85, 90 shows a year.
The band's biggest claim to fame these days is that pretty much every classic rock radio station in North America bumps their track Working for the Weekend on Friday afternoons. First formed in Puerto Rico in the late 1970s, Menudo is an institution in Spanish-speaking Latin America. They're something of an outlier on this list, as no one older than 17 is allowed to sing in the band, so the lineup has drastically changed on a regular basis for nearly 50 years. More than 50 young men have come and gone, and the project has moved around 20 million albums of mostly Spanish-language music. But in 1984 and 1985, Menudo's organizers and label made a concerted effort to win the hearts of the English-speaking world. The single Hold Me was really the only one to make any waves on the charts, but Menudo did land a lot of performances on American TV around that time. The band has also produced some very successful solo artists, including Ricky Martin and songwriter Draco Rosa. Martin became one of the biggest stars of Latin pop, and co-wrote many of his English-language hits with Rosa, including The Cup of Life, Living La Vida Loca, and Shake Your Bon Bon. Menudo itself has continued shifting through lineup changes and releasing new music, but it never quite regained its footing in the English-speaking world. Boy bands may have been big in the 80s, but so were family acts like the Jets and DeBarge. Signed to Motown Records, DeBarge was made up of siblings Bunny, Mark, Randy, James, and Elle. They were marketed as down-to-earth teen idols, and both their slow dance ballads like All This Love and funkier pop offerings like I Like It resonated with younger listeners. They peaked commercially in 1985 when Rhythm of the Night topped the adult contemporary and R&B charts and crossed over to reach number 3 on the pop chart. Who's Holding Donna Now also performed well, and the band even got so influential they sang a reworked version of I Like It for a McDonald's ad. By 1989, DeBarge had splintered, and Motown tried to break Elle as a solo artist. Unfortunately, he only had moderate success and a single hit, the short-circuit theme Who's Johnny, before going to prison on a drug conviction in 2008. Elle's siblings have also struggled with substance abuse and run-ins with the law. Most of them have maintained something of a public persona in the years since they were stars.
I'm sick and tired of seeing my family in pain like this. You know, I don't want to go to generation.
In the late 70s, artists started combining sensitive feelings and studio expertise to create yacht rock. Largely billed as elegant rock for grown-ups, the soft crooning of Christopher Cross fit the bill like a glove. Cross's single Sailing made waves in 1980, and it may have been the gentlest record to ever go to number 1 on the pop chart. The relaxed guitar strumming and sweet vocals contrasted perfectly with his previous single, the jaunty Ride Like the Wind, and helped him become the first person to ever win the Grammys for Song of the Year, Record of the Year, Album of the Year, and Best New Artist in the same night. And that wasn't the end of his award tour. In 1981, Cross also won the Oscar for Best Original Song for the melancholy Arthur's theme, Best That You Can Do, from the movie Arthur. But it all turned out to be too much. Too soon as far as Cross was concerned. MTV arrived on the scene just after Cross did, and it influenced music to be louder and more appealing to younger people. Cross's career never really recovered from that, and his last hit, Think of Laura, came out in 1983. Michael Jackson wasn't the only success story to come out of the Jackson 5. The third eldest member of the group was original frontman Jermaine Jackson. He had a formidable solo career in the 80s, but trying to make it on his own while his star siblings Michael and Janet ruled the music industry was no easy task.
Is it intimidating when you work with other people who are very successful?
No, because you can all relate. It's like we're all doing something creative.
Despite this challenge, Jermaine was a major force in R&B radio, and he sent 11 songs into the genre's top 40 throughout the decade. He actually bookended that run with number 1 hits, 1980's Let's Get Serious and 1989's Don't Take It Personal. The fact that he achieved all this in the same span of time that Michael Jackson's Thriller turned the music industry on its head shows just how much of a consummate performer Jermaine was. Even so, the frustration of living in Michael's shadow did eventually catch up to him, and in 1991, he released the hostile diss track Word to the Bad, directed at his ultra-famous brother. The track did get some media attention, but never charted particularly well. These days, he still makes music, but he's largely halted his solo work in favor of reunion tours with the Jacksons and other creative projects. In 1987, a smooth jazz combo fronted by a powerful vocalist and pianist won the Grammy Award for Best New Artist. That was Bruce Hornsby and The Range, and they were fresh off the glum number 1 hit, The Way It Is, and its romantic follow-up, Mandolin Rain. As the 80s wore on, Hornsby's songs got decent play on pop radio, but they really dominated the soft rock scene. Outside The Range, Hornsby also collaborated with some of the biggest names of 20th century rock. He earned several more Grammy nominations for co-writing Eagle Don Henley's 1989 hit, The End of the Innocents, and even played in the Grateful Dead for a while. Hornsby's work is so smooth and inoffensive that it has largely turned into anonymous background noise. It's often played in waiting rooms or used as on-hold music. Tracks like The Valley Road and Look Out Any Window still get played on soft rock radio today, and Hornsby continued to land songs on Billboard's adult contemporary chart well into the 2000s with and without The Range. But sadly, he doesn't get much attention from the musical mainstream anymore. In the less socially conscious era of the 1980s, it was perfectly acceptable for a major musical group to call themselves the Fat Boys and mock their own large stature and appetites. But more than that, the Fat Boys were legitimate hip-hop pioneers who brought music and culture out of the boroughs of New York and into the rest of the United States. Made up of Prince Marky D, Cool Rock Ski, and the Human Beatbox, the group started out as Disco 3, but renamed themselves the Fat Boys after one of their own songs. And since they often skipped over the serious stuff in favor of self-deprecating humor and good fun, they even starred in the 1987 comedy Disorderlies. Their influence on hip-hop is often forgotten. Funny enough, both of their biggest hits were revamped takes on classics of the baby boomer generation. Wipeout, featuring the Beach Boys, and their rendition of The Twist by Chubby Checker remain their biggest songs on Spotify to this day. But as hip-hop grew more serious, the Fat Boys became less and less influential. After a few more albums, Prince Marky D went solo. Sadly, there will never be a Fat Boys reunion, as the human beatbox died in 1995 and Prince Marky D passed away in 2021. In the early 80s, countrified pop had a huge moment that helped the likes of Kenny Rogers and Dolly Parton cross over to the pop charts in a big way. In the process, lesser-known country stars also found a new audience, and Juice Newton was one of them. Newton first released music with the trio Juice Newton and Silver Spur, but the 3 records they put out in the 70s were largely slept on. Newton ultimately dropped the Silver Spur name, but continued writing with the guitarist Otha Young. Before long, she finally popped with listeners. In 1981, Newton's country-tinged cover of the 60s pop ballad Angel of the Morning peaked at number 4, and pop smash Queen of Hearts quickly followed, reaching number 2. Newton managed a few more hits, but by 1983, the country pop fad was on its way out. She continued doing well in the country music scene for several years, though.
I really like to sing, I like performing in front of people, and I hope just to keep going.
She ultimately took a years-long hiatus from recording music, but some of her songs have been featured in pretty major movies like Promising Young Woman and Deadpool. She did re-enter the live scene and played clubs for several years, but she hasn't toured or released any new music in years. Kim Carnes recorded 4 albums for various labels in the 70s before she hit the top 10 in 1980 with her cover of The Miracles' More Love. That same year, her duet with Kenny Rogers, Don't Fall in Love with a Dreamer, also charted well. So by the time her 1981 album Mistaken Identity came out, the world was finally ready for Kim Carnes. The record featured the most successful song of Carnes' career, Betty Davis Eyes. The track was about a mysterious and charismatic woman and was number 1 on the pop chart for so long that Billboard named it the top song of 1981. Unfortunately, the song got so much play for so long that the masses got tired of Carnes' raspy crooning, unique as it was. She never made it to the top 10 again, although she kept making albums well into the 2000s. We've already touched on how MTV helped shift the sound of 80s music to attract younger listeners, but there are still a few early 80s stars who found success in the more mature soft rock scene that came before. It was in that circle that the duo Air Supply, possibly the most relaxed and inoffensive blockbuster act in music history, found their footing. Featuring English vocalist Graham Russell and Australia's Russell Hitchcock, Air Supply cooed and warbled about love and heartbreak from the point of view of seasoned adults who'd lived some life. Air Supply landed 8 singles in the top 5 from 1980 to 1983, including Lost in Love, All Out of Love, and the number 1 hit, The One That You Love. But times and tastes changed, and by mid-decade, Air Supply shifted to the niche of adult contemporary radio with their soft rock peers. The band continued to score minor hits in that scene all the way until the early 90s, and though they never got as commercially successful as they were in their heyday, that never stopped them from touring.
Their early work was a little too new wave for my taste. But when Sports came out in '83, I think they really came into their own.
Huey Lewis and the News started off as a San Francisco bar band influenced by blues and R&B, and they had a real moment in the early 80s. The 1983 album Sports sold over 7 million copies and generated 5 monster hits in Heart and Soul, I Want a New Drug, Walking on a Thin Line, The Heart of Rock and Roll, and If This Is It. The group's everyman lead singer was the very face of rock and roll in 1985. He even landed a cameo in Back to the Future as a rock-hating talent show judge who didn't care for Marty McFly's The Power of Love cover, a track that got the News an Oscar nomination for Best Original Song. Their record, 4, continued Lewis's dominion over the rock scene, with singles Stuck With You and Jacob's Ladder both topping the chart. Once the 80s ended, the market for the band's brand of pop rock went away, and Huey Lewis and the News soldiered on as a retro act. They ultimately embraced this new role and wound up recording covers of old R&B hits like But It's Alright and She's Some Kind of Wonderful for the adult contemporary audience. Sadly, Lewis has lost a lot of hearing over the years from Meniere's disease, and he can no longer perform.
And the worst part is I can't hear music.
In 1981, the Bangs were the best-known band to come out of Los Angeles' lightly psychedelic 60s throwback scene known as the Paisley Underground. Over the next few years, they'd renamed themselves the Bangles and become one of the biggest pop rock bands of the era. One of the many things that set the Bangles apart from their contemporaries was that they were all women, which was extremely rare at the time. Even more interesting was the fact that the band didn't really have a front person. 3 of its 4 members took turns on lead vocals. A number of their songs made heavy rounds on MTV and the radio, including Manic Monday, written by Prince, and chart toppers Walk Like an Egyptian and Eternal Flame. Unfortunately, the accolades and popularity became too much for the Bangles to bear, and they split up as the 90s approached. Guitarist Susanna Hoffs got a couple hits as a solo act under her belt before reuniting with her old bandmates to tour the nostalgia circuit. Tears for Fears could go from ominous to overwhelming in the blink of an eye, and that was made possible by duo Roland Orzabal and Kurt Smith's lush soundscapes and serious lyrics. They occupied a niche between new wave and goth rock that helped them find success both in their native England and across the pond. And while they sang about Cold War-era tyrants and everybody wants to rule the world, and yelled about protests and mental health and Shout, the upbeat and superficial 80s music scene somehow welcomed them with open arms. Both those tracks went to #1 in the United States, and the bittersweet love song Head Over Heels hit #3. Tears for Fears spent years working on their follow-up album, coming back at the end of the 80s with a sound that felt retro and new at the same time. Sowing the Seeds of Love, an unabashed homage to the Beatles' experimental period, reached #2 on the American pop chart and #1 on the just-formed alternative rock chart. But Smith left the band shortly thereafter, and while their 1993 single Break It Down Again did reasonably well on the charts, the world largely moved on from Tears for Fears as the 90s progressed. Orzabal and Smith did reunite in 2021 and released another full-length album in 2022, but 4 decades have passed since they hit it big, and they'll never occupy the space in the industry they once did.